The first thing I noticed upon arriving at my new home was the silence. It was a kind of dragging silence, deep and heavy, as if the house itself was holding its breath. The Victorian structure loomed before me, imposing yet faded, with its tall, dusty windows and a garden forgotten by time. The grass grew wildly, enveloping the stones of the walkway as if trying to swallow them. After a difficult divorce, I needed a fresh start, and this house seemed to be the perfect place. The realtor had mentioned that the price was below market value, but I didn't pay much attention to it. To me, what mattered was that I was alone, away from the memories that haunted me. As I carried the boxes inside, I noticed that the neighborhood was strangely quiet. Looking out from the living room window, I saw similar houses, each hiding their secrets behind closed curtains. A movement in the house next door caught my attention. An elderly woman peeked through the window, but when our eyes met, she quickly pulled away. A sense of discomfort settled in me, but I forced a smile. It's just the stress of moving, I thought. As night fell, I began unpacking. With each box I opened, memories of the past blended with the anticipation of a new beginning. But as darkness enveloped the house, a strange unease overtook me. The sounds of the night intensified, and the silence grew deeper, almost palpable. I felt as if something was watching me, but there was nothing but the shadows dancing on the walls. On the first night, things began to change. As I prepared for sleep, I heard a faint whisper echoing through the walls. At first I thought it was just the wind, but soon I realized there was no wind at all. I forced myself to close my eyes and ignore it, but as the hours passed, the unease only grew. The whisper turned into a soft calling, almost like a distant lament. In the back of my mind, a small voice warned me that something was not right, but I had to believe it was just my imagination. After all, it was just an old house. Yet the feeling persisted, like an echo in an empty hallway, waiting to be heard. When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed of the elderly woman from next door, her empty eyes watching me as if she were trying to communicate. The next morning, the day was bright, but a cloud of uncertainty loomed over me. The hot coffee helped ease my tension, and I decided it was time to explore the house. As I walked through the rooms, a strange feeling of déjà vu washed over me, as if I had been there before. However, I couldn't quite pinpoint what felt familiar. And so, as the morning dragged on, a question arose in my mind. What had happened in that house before I arrived? That afternoon, while exploring each room of the house, I was struck by a strange sense of nostalgia. The walls seemed to have ears and somehow knew my story. Upon entering the living room, I noticed a large framed mirror dominating one of the walls. It was dusty, reflecting a distorted image of my surroundings. As I approached, I sensed something moving behind me. I turned quickly, but there was no one there. The room was empty, except for my own reflection, which looked paler than usual. My heart began to race, and a feeling of claustrophobia settled in. I tried to calm myself, taking deep breaths, but the whisper I had heard the night before returned to my mind, amplifying my anxiety. I decided to explore the attic. The stairs were steep and creaked under my weight, as if the house were complaining. Upon reaching the top, I found a locked door. The doorknob felt cold to the touch, and the wood appeared old and worn. Curiosity consumed me, and I searched for a key among the objects I found, but there was nothing. The whisper I had heard at night seemed to intensify, becoming an almost deafening murmur, as if the house itself were pleading for me to enter. The feeling that something was about to happen left me restless. I decided to head back down and tidy up what I could. Perhaps normalcy could restore my peace of mind. That night, tension hung in the air. The silence that once comforted me now felt oppressive. Every little noise became an event. The creak of wood, the rustle of leaves outside, everything seemed amplified. As I tried to fall asleep, I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, but soon I was besieged by nightmares. I dreamed that I was trapped inside the house, surrounded by shadows whispering my name. When I finally woke up, the sun was already high, and a new day had begun. I went to the kitchen to brew coffee, and when I looked out the window, I saw the elderly woman again. She was standing in the next garden, watching the house. Her gaze was piercing, as if she were studying every move I made. I quickly lowered my head. I didn't want to be seen. As the morning unfolded, my curiosity intensified. I needed to learn more about the house and its former residents. At the city library, I immersed myself in old records, trying to find information that could explain what was happening. What I found, however, was even more disturbing. There were a series of entries about unexplained disappearances in the area, all linked to houses that, like mine, had undergone tragedies. One specific story caught my attention. It spoke of a family that mysteriously disappeared without a trace, and the last person to see them was a woman. My heart began to race as I realized that the date of the disappearance coincided with the time I had moved into the house. I was starting to feel like part of a deeper cycle, a cycle I hadn't noticed before. With this new information, I returned home, determined to uncover more. The feeling that something was waiting for me grew increasingly oppressive. Upon entering, a sudden chill enveloped the atmosphere. A cold breeze seemed to creep through the rooms, and as I climbed the stairs again, the whisper returned, this time clearer. It was calling me, urging me to open the attic door. The decision to ascend to the attic again felt inevitable. An invisible force pulled me, as if the house itself was beckoning me to unveil its secrets. My heart raced as I climbed the creaking stairs. The space was shrouded in an unsettling twilight, and the whisper grew more insistent with each step. When I reached the locked door, the cold doorknob seemed to vibrate under my touch, and the key I had found earlier weighed in my pocket like a talisman offering me courage. The air around me was dense, charged with a disconcerting expectation. With a decisive movement, I inserted the key into the lock and turned it. The door creaked open, revealing a dark, dusty space. As I stepped inside, the temperature dropped further. The smell of mold and rotting wood invaded my nostrils, and a chill ran down my spine. The attic was filled with stacked boxes and furniture draped in white sheets, as if the objects were waiting to be awakened. The whisper intensified, now transforming into a melancholic wail. "I'm sorry," I thought. "I didn't know you were here." The whisper seemed to plead for understanding, and even without knowing why, I felt the need to help. I approached a table covered with diaries and old photographs. Opening one of the diaries, the time-stained words seemed to scream for attention. Each entry revealed a bit of the story of the family that had lived there. The first pages spoke of everyday life, but as I progressed, the writing became more distressing. They described strange events, like shadows moving on their own and objects disappearing, only to reappear in unexpected places. The last entries spoke of a call that the mother felt, something that drew her to the attic, where the whisper was strongest. It was as if she were being called by something that led her to a dark fate. A wave of sadness washed over me as I read about the family's disappearance. The last entry was the most disturbing. "Night has fallen, and I can no longer ignore. The voice is clearer now, and I need to go. I feel that I won't return. If anyone finds this, please don't do the same." When I finished reading, a sense of dread enveloped me. The presence I felt was not just a fleeting sensation. There was a connection between me and that family. I was in some way being drawn into the same trap. Suddenly the atmosphere grew icy, and the shadows began to move around me. I looked up at the ceiling and saw indistinct shapes that seemed to writhe and slide. The whisper turned into screams, echoing throughout the house as if the souls trapped there were revolting. A denser shadow approached, and I could feel its anger, its pain. With my heart racing, I ran for the door, but it was shut. The key had vanished from my pocket, and the wood of the door seemed to come alive, refusing to open. Panic took hold of me. As I struggled to escape, a scream echoed in my mind. "Get out! Get out now!" Finally, the door swung open with a snap, and I lunged out of the attic, nearly stumbling on the stairs. The wailing of the voices seemed to follow me, echoing off the walls as I descended. As soon as I reached the ground, I slammed the door shut, breathless and full of adrenaline. What I had found there was far more than I was willing to face. When I looked around, the silence returned, but it was no longer a reassuring silence. Now, something new lingered in the house, a suffocating expectation, as if everything was waiting to see what I would do next. And the image of the elderly woman at the window next door still persisted in my mind. As if she knew I had unleashed something that could not be stopped. It was the beginning of summer vacation when my parents decided to take a week-long trip to the coast, leaving me in the sprawling silence of our suburban home. As a 16-year-old, I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation at the prospect of being alone. At first, it seemed like a dream. Freedom to binge-watch my favorite shows, stay up late, and indulge in snacks without the prying eyes of my parents. But as the sun dipped below the horizon on that first evening, a sense of unease crept in. Our house, a 2-story structure painted in shades of soft yellow, stood comfortably on Maple Street, a place where everyone knew each other. It was a neighborhood defined by familiarity. Children laughing, dogs barking, the scent of grilled burgers wafting through the air. I could hear the distant chatter of neighbors as I settled into the couch, the TV flickering, casting shadows that danced along the walls. Yet, as the night deepened, the once cozy house transformed. The familiar creaks of the floorboards turned ominous. The silence grew heavy, punctuated only by the occasional rustle of leaves outside my window. I glanced outside, half expecting to see the neighborhood bustling with life. Instead, I found only the dim glow of streetlights and the occasional car passing by, their headlights sweeping across my living room like ghostly fingers. I dismissed the creeping sensation in my chest, convincing myself that I was simply adjusting to solitude. It wasn't until later that night, as I prepared to head to bed, that my phone buzzed on the table, drawing my attention. I picked it up and noticed a new message from an unknown number. The text read, "I see you." My heart raced, but I shrugged it off. Surely it was a prank. I replied with a half-hearted joke, dismissing it as harmless fun. But as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind raced. Who could it be? How did they get my number? My thoughts spiraled into paranoia as I tried to remember if I had shared my contact information with anyone recently. The house seemed to settle around me, the whispers of the night filtering through the walls, growing louder as I replayed the message in my head. I tried to sleep, but every little noise, a creak, a sigh, the hum of the refrigerator, felt amplified in the stillness. I lay there, wide awake, staring at the darkened room, feeling as if someone were watching me. Just as I began to drift off, my phone buzzed again, pulling me back to alertness. Another message, this time with a photo attached. I held my breath as I opened it, my pulse quickening. The image was grainy, but unmistakably, it was a shot of my front yard taken from the street. My heart thudded in my chest. Suddenly, the excitement of being alone morphed into a primal fear. My mind raced, and I shot up from my bed, my gaze darting to the window. Outside, the shadows seemed to stretch and twist in the dim light, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there, lurking just beyond the edge of the light. Was it just my imagination? Or was I really being watched? My skin prickled with dread as I recalled the unfamiliar car parked across the street earlier that day. It felt wrong, out of place. I jumped out of bed and moved cautiously to the window, peering into the darkness. My breath caught as I scanned the street, searching for movement. Nothing, just the shadows clinging to the corners of my yard. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being observed, the prickling sensation at the back of my neck refusing to fade. Just as I turned away from the window, my phone buzzed again. I hesitated, dread pooling in my stomach as I picked it up, my hands shaking. This time the message was simple: "You're not alone." Panic surged through me, and I dropped the phone, its screen illuminating the dark room like a beacon. I stumbled back, my heart racing. There was no way this was a joke anymore. My palms began to sweat, and my mind raced with scenarios, each more terrifying than the last. I forced myself to breathe. I needed to think clearly. Was there really someone out there, or was my mind playing tricks on me? With my heart hammering, I felt the weight of the house pressing in on me, and I realized I had to figure out what was happening before the night consumed me entirely. Sleep evaded me that night, each tick of the clock amplifying the eerie silence around me. I spent what felt like hours pacing my room, eyes glued to the window, half expecting to see the shadowy figure emerge from the dark. My phone lay on the bed, its screen lighting up every few minutes with a new message, each one unraveling my composure a little more. Finally, at around 3 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed the phone and opened the thread of messages, feeling both fear and curiosity. Each message had come from that same unknown number, growing more menacing by the minute. I scrolled through them again. I see you. You're not alone. And the latest, a chilling whisper. They're coming for you. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. It was one thing to be pranked, but this felt real, tangible. Was someone really watching me? I glanced at my reflection in the dark window, my pale face staring back, eyes wide and frightened. I was just a kid, alone in a big house, and the darkness felt like it was closing in. With a shaky breath, I decided I needed to be proactive. I reached for my laptop and turned it on, hoping that a flickering screen and the glow of my favorite games could distract me. But as the familiar chime sounded, my anxiety returned, a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. I was uncomfortably aware of every creak in the house, every whisper of wind that brushed against the windows. After a few minutes of browsing aimlessly, I remembered the local community forum. I quickly pulled it up, searching for any recent posts about strange occurrences in the neighborhood. As I scrolled through the pages, my heart sank. There were several posts about a series of break-ins that had happened over the past few weeks. The last comment made my blood run cold. Stay vigilant, folks. It's not just about the valuables. They're watching. I felt a chill creep up my spine. My parents had mentioned the break-ins, but I didn't think much of it. Now it felt like a dark omen, a premonition that something was very wrong. Suddenly, the solitude of my house morphed into something suffocating, and I cursed myself for letting my parents go away without me. As I sat there, lost in thought, my phone buzzed again. I glanced down, and my heart dropped. The message was simple, yet it struck me like a bolt of lightning. I'm already inside. I shot up from my chair, panic surging through my veins. I glanced toward the hallway leading to the stairs and took a few cautious steps back. My mind raced with possibilities. Had I left a door unlocked? I felt a mixture of fear and determination as I grabbed a baseball bat from my closet, something my dad had left for home defense, though I never imagined I would actually need it. With the bat clutched tightly in my hand, I crept toward the hallway, every step slow and deliberate. I paused, straining to hear any sound, but the silence was oppressive. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears as I reached the staircase. Each step felt like a mile, and I was acutely aware of how the wooden boards creaked beneath my weight. At the bottom of the stairs, I stopped, peering into the darkened living room. The shadows felt alive, shifting and changing as the streetlights flickered outside. I could barely make out the outline of the couch, the coffee table, the door to the back patio. It all felt foreign and threatening. Is anyone there? I called out, my voice shaking slightly. I felt foolish for asking, but I needed to confront the silence, to challenge whatever threat lay hidden in the dark. There was no response, only the sound of my own breath and the beating of my heart. Then, from somewhere in the house, a noise pierced the stillness, a soft thump like something being moved. It came from the kitchen. Adrenaline surged through me as I gripped the bat tighter, inching toward the doorway. Each step echoed in my ears, a reminder that I was all alone, facing whatever was hiding in the shadows. Just as I was about to turn the corner, my phone buzzed again, and I almost dropped the bat. I glanced down to see another message, and my blood ran cold. It read, "You shouldn't have looked." I hesitated for a moment, the fear twisting my stomach. It felt like a warning. I needed to decide, should I run upstairs and lock myself in my room, or confront whatever was lurking in the kitchen? The idea of running away felt weak, but the fear of facing an intruder paralyzed me. With trembling hands, I made my choice. I edged closer to the kitchen, heart racing, every fiber of my being screaming at me to turn back. But I couldn't. I had to know what was happening, and if I was going to survive this night, I had to confront it head-on. The kitchen was eerily quiet, the air thick with tension as I took a deep breath and stepped into the room, my grip tightening around the baseball bat. The fluorescent light flickered above, casting strange shadows that danced across the tiled floor. The silence felt oppressive, and I strained to hear any sound, waiting for something, anything, to break the stillness. As I surveyed the kitchen, everything appeared normal at first glance. The sink was empty, dishes stacked neatly in the drying rack. The fridge hummed softly, a mundane reminder of daily life, yet it only amplified the feeling of dread hanging in the air. My eyes darted to the back door, which led to the small patio. It was locked, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it had been opened at some point. Suddenly, a soft rustling came from the pantry. My heart raced, and I turned sharply, pointing the bat toward the sound. "Who's there?" I demanded, my voice steadier than I felt. The rustling stopped abruptly, and the silence returned, punctuated only by the rhythmic thumping of my heart. I hesitated, debating whether to investigate further or retreat to the safety of my room. But I couldn't allow myself to be paralyzed by fear. Gathering every ounce of courage, I took a step toward the pantry door. I could feel the sweat trickling down my back, but I pressed on, my heart pounding like a drum in my ears. I reached out and grabbed the handle, pulling it open with a swift motion. The door creaked loudly, echoing in the silence. Inside, the shelves were filled with canned goods and boxes of pasta, but there was no one there. Just a few stray bags of chips sat askew on the bottom shelf, almost as if they had been disturbed recently. Disappointment and relief washed over me simultaneously. I was half expecting a figure to leap out at me, but instead, I found only the mundane remnants of a normal household. Just as I was about to close the door, a small slip of paper caught my eye, crumpled at the back of the shelf. I pulled it out, my hands shaking. It was a note, hastily scrawled in messy handwriting. "They're watching. Trust no one." My stomach twisted as I read the words, and a wave of cold washed over me. The message felt like a sinister echo of my own fears, and the reality of my situation hit me like a punch to the gut. I quickly stuffed the note in my pocket, my instincts screaming at me to get out of the kitchen. I needed to find a way to protect myself, but I also had to figure out who was behind the messages. I turned to head back to the living room when I heard a faint sound behind me, a whisper barely audible over the hum of the fridge. My breath caught in my throat. "Hello?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. The whisper came again, a soft, indistinguishable sound that sent chills down my spine. It felt as though the darkness itself was alive, beckoning me to look deeper, to uncover whatever horrors lay hidden. Then I heard it, a soft footfall behind me. My heart dropped and I spun around, the bat raised high, ready to defend myself. But there was nothing there, just the shadows shifting in the dim light, the echo of my own heartbeat ringing loudly in my ears. I felt foolish, heart racing from a mere whisper in the dark, but the primal instinct to survive kicked in. With renewed determination, I decided to call the police. I dashed back to the living room, fumbling with my phone as I dialed. My fingers shook as I pressed the buttons, and when the operator finally answered, I blurted out, "I think someone's in my house. I keep getting these messages, and I feel like I'm being watched." "Stay calm," the operator said, her voice steady and reassuring. "Can you tell me your address?" I recited the information, my voice trembling. As I spoke, I glanced nervously out the front window, scanning the street for any sign of movement. I wanted to believe I was overreacting, but the creeping sense of dread gnawed at my stomach. "Help is on the way," she assured me. "Stay on the line with me until the officers arrive. Are you in a safe location?" "Yes, I'm in my living room," I said, trying to catch my breath. But as I turned to look back into the house, something caught my eye. Movement outside my window. My heart dropped as I noticed a figure standing just beyond the streetlight's glow. The shadows concealed most of their features, but the outline was unmistakable. Someone was watching me. "Are they there now?" the operator asked, pulling me back to reality. "Yes, I think someone is outside," I said, panic rising in my throat. "Please hurry." "Keep your doors locked and stay away from the windows," she instructed firmly. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. With shaky hands, I moved away from the window, my pulse racing. Just then my phone buzzed again, and I nearly dropped it in fright. Another message from that unknown number. I hesitated for a moment before looking down. The text read, "Don't call for help. They're already inside." My heart raced, and I looked around the room, frantically searching for a place to hide. The living room felt too exposed, too vulnerable. I needed to find somewhere safe, somewhere to regroup and figure out my next move. I thought of the basement. It was dark and typically unused, but it might give me a chance to hide and listen for whatever was happening in the house. With my heart pounding, I whispered, "I'm going to move to the basement now." I told the operator what I was doing, and she urged me to be careful. I felt both brave and terrified as I made my way to the basement door. As I descended the stairs, the darkness enveloped me. I flicked on the light switch, and the dim bulb flickered to life, casting weak beams of light across the concrete floor. I could barely see, but the shadows loomed large around me. I scanned the area, looking for a safe corner to huddle in, but the unsettling feeling of being watched lingered in the air, thick and suffocating. I leaned against the cold wall, my heart racing. My phone buzzed again, but this time I didn't want to look. Instead, I held my breath, hoping that the officers would arrive soon. As I waited, the weight of the darkness pressed down on me, and I wondered if I would make it through the night without uncovering the truth of who or what was hunting me. I've always prided myself on being independent, relishing my solo life in this quaint suburban neighborhood. My apartment, a small yet cozy space filled with mismatched furniture and potted plants, was my sanctuary. I often found solace in the simple things: a warm cup of coffee in the morning, the soft glow of fairy lights against the night, and the sound of my cat, Muffin, purring contentedly on my lap. The world outside my window was a picturesque scene of tree-lined streets and friendly neighbors, where the greatest excitement was a neighborhood barbecue or a summer block party. Yet, there was a subtle undercurrent of something unsettling creeping into my life, something I couldn't quite place. It began when I first noticed him, a man standing across the street, staring at my apartment. At first, I thought nothing of it. Maybe he was just waiting for someone or lost in thought. But day after day, I caught him standing there, motionless, his gaze fixed intently on my window. I could never see his face clearly, always obscured by shadows or the branches of the oak tree that stood guard outside. It wasn't until I started feeling a chill run down my spine whenever I caught him that I began to question his intentions. I tried to brush off the feeling, telling myself I was being paranoid. I often joked with my friends about it, saying, "You know you're in a safe neighborhood when your biggest concern is a guy staring at you from across the street." But the jokes felt hollow. One evening, while I was curled up on the couch watching a movie, I caught a glimpse of him again. The light from my window illuminated my living room, and I felt his eyes boring into me, even through the glass. I turned my head quickly, hoping to shake off the sensation, but the nagging feeling lingered. I decided to distract myself with work and pushed my laptop away, forcing myself to focus on something other than the discomfort gnawing at my mind. That night, I locked the door and drew the curtains tight as if the fabric could shield me from the outside world. As I lay in bed, I tried to convince myself that I was simply imagining things, that he was just another neighbor who happened to glance in my direction. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. The feeling of being watched was like a persistent itch growing stronger each day. I fell asleep with thoughts swirling in my head, the man's face shrouded in darkness, haunting my dreams. The following week, I tried to live my life as normally as possible, but the man across the street had become a constant presence in my mind. Every time I stepped outside, I felt a prickling awareness of his eyes on me, and I could hardly focus on mundane tasks like grocery shopping or walking Muffin. My once vibrant neighborhood felt like a claustrophobic prison, and the familiarity of my surroundings morphed into something threatening. It was a Tuesday evening when the unease escalated to something more tangible. I had just settled down to binge-watch a new series. The living room was dimly lit, the only sound being the faint murmur of dialogue from the television. Just as I began to relax, a sudden noise outside jolted me from my thoughts, a faint, scratching sound against the window. My heart raced and I hesitated, the tension building in my chest. Taking a deep breath, I pushed myself off the couch and crept toward the window, my palms clammy against the wall. With every step, the scratching intensified, echoing in the stillness of the night. I pulled back the curtain ever so slightly, my breath hitching as I peered outside. Nothing. Just the empty street, bathed in shadows and the soft glow of streetlights. My eyes scanned the area, searching for anything out of place. But there was only silence, thick and suffocating, wrapping around me like a fog. I stepped back, convinced my imagination was playing tricks on me again, and tried to shake off the eerie sensation. That night, sleep eluded me. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, haunted by thoughts of the man. Who was he? What did he want? I knew I couldn't let this continue. The next day, I resolved to confront him, to demand an explanation for his behavior. As the sun dipped below the horizon the following evening, I prepared myself for the encounter. I dressed in a simple pair of jeans and a hoodie, trying to project confidence that I didn't quite feel. I steeled myself, reminding myself that I was not a victim. I was strong, capable, and deserving of a peaceful life. But when I stepped outside, the man was nowhere to be seen. My heart sank, a mixture of relief and disappointment flooding me. Maybe he sensed my resolve and decided to retreat, or perhaps this was just another game he was playing. I felt the slightest tremor of fear creep up my spine. I took a walk around the block, hoping to shake off the anxiety that was beginning to feel like a second skin. As I passed the rows of houses, I glanced at the darkened windows, wondering if anyone else noticed him too. Each passing moment was a reminder of how isolated I felt in my own home. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him again, standing motionless at the end of the street, silhouetted against the fading light. He didn't move, didn't flinch as I approached. It was as if he were a statue, carved from the very darkness surrounding him. I squared my shoulders, swallowing hard, and decided this was it. I would confront him. "Hey!" I shouted, my voice breaking the silence of the night. "What do you want?" His head turned slowly, and though I still couldn't see his face, I felt his eyes locking onto mine. For a moment, everything around us faded. The streetlights flickered, and I took a step back, a wave of dread washing over me. I opened my mouth to say something else, but before I could, he turned abruptly and disappeared into the shadows. Confusion and terror mingled within me as I stood frozen, the chill of the night creeping into my bones. Was he running away? Or had he been waiting for this moment, enjoying the fear he instilled in me? I hurried back home, locking the door behind me and sliding down against it, my heart pounding in my chest. I was safe, I told myself, but as I sat in the silence of my living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. I barely slept that night, tossing and turning as the shadows in my room seemed to stretch and contort into unfamiliar shapes. Every creak of the house felt amplified, echoing through the silence like a sinister whisper. The memory of the man watching me weighed heavily on my mind. I felt as though he was lurking just beyond my door, waiting for the moment I would let my guard down. The next morning, I forced myself to go to work despite the fatigue weighing on my eyelids. The barista job at the local cafe had always been a source of comfort, but today it felt like an unwelcoming prison. I busied myself with tasks, trying to ignore the feeling that someone was watching me even inside the cafe. The regulars went about their routines, but I couldn't shake the paranoia gnawing at my thoughts. On my lunch break, I decided to do some research on the recent disappearances in the neighborhood. I was determined to uncover any connection between them and the strange man across the street. My heart raced as I scrolled through articles online, each headline chilling me to the core. There had been 3 reported cases of women going missing in the past year, all last seen in the vicinity of my street. It sent a cold shiver down my spine. Was he involved? I recalled the way he had looked at me, a predatory glint in his eyes. Could he have been observing me for a purpose? My heart sank as I thought of my own vulnerability living alone. The cafe's bustling atmosphere felt stifling as my thoughts spiraled deeper into fear. After my shift, I decided to return home instead of going out with friends like I had planned. I needed to be alert, to observe the man with more caution. As I walked up my driveway, I caught a glimpse of him standing outside his house, staring directly at me. This time, his expression was unreadable, neither threatening nor friendly. It was as if he was gauging my reaction, waiting for me to make a move. Gathering my courage, I decided I would have to confront him again, not just for myself, but for the women who had disappeared. With my heart pounding, I marched across the street. Each step felt like a countdown, an involuntary drum roll to a confrontation I didn't know I was ready for. "Why are you watching me?" I demanded, the words tumbling out with more authority than I felt. "What do you want?" He blinked slowly, and a smile crept across his face, a smile that sent a surge of panic through me. "I'm not watching you," he replied, his voice low and eerily calm. "I'm watching out for you." I recoiled, instinctively taking a step back. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling despite my efforts to sound brave. "There's danger out here," he said, gesturing vaguely around the neighborhood. "You should be careful." "Careful of what?" "You? You're the one I'm scared of." I shot back, clenching my fists. "What's your connection to the disappearances? Why are you really here?" His smile faded, replaced by a look of disappointment. "You don't understand. I'm trying to help. You're being watched, and I've been trying to keep you safe." Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn and run, but curiosity kept me rooted to the spot. "By who? By what?" "Not what, but who," he replied cryptically. "Someone is watching you closely, waiting for the right moment. You need to be cautious. It's only a matter of time before they strike." My heart raced, confusion and fear swirling together like a tempest. Could he be telling the truth? Or was this a manipulation tactic designed to make me lower my guard? "I don't believe you," I said finally, turning to leave. "Get away from me." "Just remember this conversation," he called after me, his voice drifting on the night air. "You're not alone, but you might be soon." As I hurried back to my house, the weight of his words pressed down on me. Had I just made a terrible mistake? I locked the door behind me, feeling a blend of fear and uncertainty creep in. I was terrified, but a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that he might not be the only danger lurking in the shadows. I spent the rest of the evening in a restless haze, every small sound igniting my anxiety. The night wore on, and sleep proved elusive. Just when I thought I might drift off, my phone buzzed on the table beside me. I reached for it, and my heart dropped. A text from an unknown number. "I see you." I never thought the walls of my house could feel so heavy. The once vibrant rooms, filled with laughter and joy, now seemed to whisper my grief in muted tones. Since the day I lost Sophie, the air has become thick with an unbearable silence. The suburban neighborhood of Maplewood, with its manicured lawns and friendly neighbors, feels like a different world, one that I no longer belong to. Each day, I move through the motions, wearing a smile for the neighbors who check in on me, but inside I am shattered. I find myself drawn to Sophie's room, a sanctuary of memories. It is a small space, painted in soft pastels with her drawings hanging proudly on the walls. I remember the way she used to giggle as she doodled, her face scrunched in concentration, the sunlight streaming in through the window, illuminating her creativity. Now the room is eerily still, untouched by time, yet steeped in sorrow. It feels as if her essence lingers in every corner. The first night alone in the house after the funeral, I curled up on her bed, inhaling the familiar scent of her lavender-scented pillow. The weight of grief settled over me like a thick blanket, and I let the tears flow. I thought I could find solace here, surrounded by her things, but as the night deepened, something shifted. The house creaked, and shadows danced along the walls. At first, I dismissed the noises as my imagination running wild, but as the clock struck midnight, the whispers began. Soft and sweet, they echoed in the stillness. "Mommy?" It was a voice so like Sophie's that I shot upright, heart pounding. My eyes darted around the room, searching for a source. Nothing. The shadows seemed to grow darker, more pronounced, but I forced myself to breathe. It had to be my mind playing tricks on me. Days passed, and the whispers became more frequent. "Mommy, come play." The voice would call out when the sun dipped below the horizon, the fading light casting long shadows that curled around the furniture. I found myself responding, talking back as if Sophie were right there with me. It was both comforting and disturbing. My heart longed for her, and every word felt like a fragile thread tying me to her memory. The more I immersed myself in the room, the more I noticed little things. Sophie's stuffed bunny was always in a different spot each morning. Her favorite pink sweater would be draped over the chair as if she had just tossed it aside after wearing it. I thought it was just my grief manifesting in strange ways, my mind coping with the loss by keeping her presence alive. But one night, as I stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street illuminated by the pale moonlight, I felt a chill run down my spine. The voice came again, clearer this time. "Mommy, I'm here." It wasn't just a whisper. It was as if she were right next to me, and I spun around, expecting to see her sweet smile. Instead, I was met with silence, the room heavy with an ominous weight. The normalcy of the neighborhood outside faded away. My friends and neighbors, who used to bring meals and comfort, felt like ghosts themselves. I was trapped in this loop of sorrow, each day bleeding into the next. I knew I needed help. But how could I explain that my daughter was speaking to me, that her spirit was alive in this house? I kept it to myself, afraid of what they might think. Yet deep down, a whisper of doubt began to unfurl within me. What if it wasn't really Sophie? What if something darker lurked in the shadows of her room, feeding off my despair? I shook the thought away, unwilling to confront the fear gnawing at the edges of my mind. I needed to hold on to the hope that she was still with me, even if just in spirit. As I climbed into bed that night, the whispers continued, weaving a tapestry of memories and sorrow. I wanted to believe it was Sophie, but a cold knot formed in my stomach. Was I truly alone, or had something taken root in the space where my daughter once played? That night, sleep came reluctantly. I tossed and turned, haunted by the echoes of Sophie's voice. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, radiant and joyful, and I felt a deep ache in my heart. I longed to embrace her, to feel the warmth of her small body against mine. But when I awoke, the emptiness felt like a little lead weight on my chest, and the whispers persisted. In the morning, I forced myself to face the day, but the bright light of the sun only intensified the shadows lurking in my mind. I made coffee in a daze, trying to cling to the routines that once brought comfort. I glanced at the clock. 10:15 a.m. My best friend Linda was due to arrive soon to check on me. I felt a mix of relief and anxiety. I wanted to share what was happening, but fear held me back. When Linda arrived, her bright smile felt like a beacon in my dark world. "How are you holding up?" she asked gently, stepping inside and looking around the familiar yet foreign space. I forced a smile, but I could see her eyes scanning the room, noting the remnants of Sophie's life. Her toys scattered, books half read, and the small desk where she used to draw. "I'm managing," I replied, trying to sound convincing. We settled into the living room, the sunlight pouring in through the windows, illuminating the dust motes floating in the air. I desperately wanted to confide in her, but the fear of being labeled as unstable kept me silent. Linda talked about her life, the mundane details that once brought me joy, but now felt like an unending reminder of the life I had lost. "Have you thought about going back to work?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. I shook my head, feeling a wave of guilt wash over me. "Not yet. I'm just not ready." As she continued to chat, I noticed movement from the corner of my eye. The door to Sophie's room, which I thought I had closed, slowly creaked open. My heart raced, and I instinctively glanced at Linda, who was oblivious to the door's ominous sway. Was it the wind? I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck standing on end. "I'll be right back," I said abruptly, trying to keep my voice steady. I stood, feeling as if I were in a trance as I walked toward the door. With each step, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Mommy, come play," echoed softly, brushing against my ears like a chilling breeze. I pushed the door open wider, revealing the room bathed in the soft glow of the afternoon sun. Everything appeared normal. The bed was made, toys neatly lined up on the shelf, but an unsettling energy thrummed in the air. I took a deep breath and stepped inside. The whispers fell silent, replaced by a deafening stillness that enveloped me. I scanned the room, heart pounding, feeling the walls press in around me. I wanted to believe it was just my imagination, that I was merely grieving and my mind was playing tricks on me. But there was something more, an awareness that I couldn't shake off. Suddenly, I caught a glimpse of something on the floor. A small, dusty journal lay partially hidden under the bed. I knelt down, the weight of it feeling heavier than just paper and ink. As I reached for it, a chill ran through me, a cold hand wrapping around my spine. "Mommy, please." The voice rang out, sharp and pleading, pulling me back into a reality I was struggling to understand. I recoiled, heart racing, as the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to flicker and move. Was it Sophie? Or was it something else entirely? "Are you okay?" Linda's voice broke through my haze, and I turned to see her standing in the doorway, worry etched across her face. "Yeah, I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile that felt brittle. I picked up the journal, feeling its weight, and opened it. The pages were filled with Sophie's delicate handwriting, doodles, and notes from her day-to-day life. But then, something caught my eye. A note scribbled in a hurried scrawl, "Mommy, don't let it in." My breath caught in my throat as the room fell silent again. I could feel the atmosphere shift, a darkness creeping in like a storm cloud. I looked up at Linda, who was watching me with concern, her eyes darting between me and the journal. "Is everything okay?" she asked, stepping closer. The weight of the moment pressed down on me. I had to tell her. I had to explain the whispers, the presence I felt. But as I opened my mouth to speak, the words caught like thorns in my throat. "Nothing. It's just—" I faltered, glancing back at the journal, feeling the panic rise within me. The line between my reality and the malevolent force that threatened to engulf me blurred. I couldn't let her see my fear. "It's just a reminder of her. I'll be okay." But as I returned to the living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. I was not alone in this house. That evening, I sat on the edge of Sophie's bed, clutching the journal close to my chest. I could still feel the chill from earlier, as if it were woven into the fabric of the room. The sunlight had faded, casting elongated shadows across the walls, and the soft whir of the ceiling fan was the only sound filling the silence. I could hear the faint ticking of the clock, a relentless reminder of time passing, but it felt like I was trapped in a moment that refused to move forward. Linda had left, promising to check in on me later, but the loneliness enveloped me like a thick fog. I glanced at the journal again, my heart racing. The innocent doodles and notes suddenly felt sinister, like a desperate plea hidden within a child's innocent world. I flipped through the pages, searching for anything that could help me make sense of the chilling note. Each doodle tugged at my heartstrings, a reminder of happier days. As I reached the last pages, my breath caught again. The drawings were more erratic, frantic even. They depicted dark figures lurking in the corners, shadowy monsters creeping closer to the house, and cryptic symbols that twisted and turned across the paper. I shivered. Had Sophie felt this presence too? My heart raced with a mixture of dread and sorrow. Then I heard it again, a soft whisper, barely audible. "Mommy, help me." It echoed through the room, pulling me deeper into its grasp. I couldn't tell if it was my imagination or something else. I stood, pacing the room, trying to shake off the chill settling over me. The shadows seemed to elongate, creeping towards me, almost alive in their movement. Suddenly I felt compelled to look out the window. I drew back the curtain and peered into the darkening neighborhood. My gaze swept across the street, the familiar houses now looking like hulking silhouettes. I spotted a figure standing across the road, half hidden in the shadows. It was hard to distinguish the features, but something about the way it stood, still, almost watching, sent a shiver down my spine. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely breaking the stillness. The figure remained silent, and I could feel my pulse quickening. Was it someone I knew? A neighbor? Or was it something more sinister? I stepped back, heart racing, pulling away from the window, convinced that whoever or whatever it was could sense my fear. Just then, my phone buzzed violently against the wooden nightstand, causing me to jump. I glanced at the screen and saw the message from the unknown number again. "I see you." My heart sank. I felt the color drain from my face as panic set in. What did this person want? Was it just a prank, or something more? I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, a battle raging within me. Should I respond? Should I tell someone? The last thing I wanted was to feel more alone. I decided to ignore it, throwing my phone onto the bed and pacing the room again. The whispers began to intensify, swirling around me like a storm. "Mommy, please, don't let it in." The childlike voice tugged at my heart, yet I felt a gnawing unease. The journal. I had to find out what Sophie knew. I grabbed it again, flipping back to the last frantic drawings. Each stroke seemed to pulse with urgency, as if she had been trying to warn me. I traced my fingers over the symbols, their shapes twisting in my mind. They felt familiar, yet unsettling, like echoes of something long forgotten. As I delved deeper into the journal, I found a small drawing that looked like the figure I had seen outside. It was sketchy and crude, but unmistakable. The dark outline loomed over a small house, and beneath it, Sophie had written a single word: "Watcher." Suddenly, the air grew thick around me, and I felt a sharp chill, like a cold breath, against my neck. I whirled around, expecting to see Linda or even my husband, but the room remained empty. The The shadows seemed to swell, stretching along the walls, morphing into shapes that lurked just beyond my vision. I stumbled back, knocking over a small lamp that crashed to the ground, shattering the silence. My heart raced as I fought the urge to scream. I was losing my grip on reality, and the weight of despair settled heavily upon me. "Mommy!" the voice echoed again, but this time it was louder, more frantic. Trembling, I clutched the journal tighter, desperately trying to ground myself in this moment. I needed to understand what was happening. I needed to confront whatever was tormenting me. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding like a drum in my ears. With shaky hands, I texted back the unknown number. "Who are you?" The seconds dragged by, each one feeling like an eternity. Just as I started to doubt my decision, my phone buzzed again, and I felt a cold chill wash over me as I read the reply. "I'm closer than you think." I moved to a small town in the heart of the United States, seeking solace and a fresh start away from the chaos of city life. The town was picturesque, with tree-lined streets and charming wooden houses that seemed to whisper tales of the past. My new home, an old wooden house with a creaky porch, had an inviting charm, yet it also wore the signs of neglect. The neighborhood felt peaceful, a refuge from the bustling urban environment I had left behind. In the first week, I took time to explore the area. The houses were mostly occupied by families who appeared to know one another well, exchanging friendly waves and warm smiles. But there was one house that caught my eye. Number 27. Its faded wooden sign, almost illegible, sat at the end of the street. The curtains were perpetually drawn, and it gave off a sense of eerie stillness. Each time I walked past, I felt a prickling sensation on the back of my neck, as if someone were watching me from within. My closest neighbors, the McAllisters, were a couple in their 50s who welcomed me with open arms. They were friendly enough, yet there was an underlying tension in their demeanor. Whenever I mentioned the house next door, their smiles faltered and they exchanged anxious glances. "Best not to get involved with that place," Mrs. McAllister said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The warning only deepened my curiosity and unease. On my first night, I settled on the porch, listening to the sounds of the night. A chilly wind whispered through the trees, stirring an unsettling feeling within me. As I glanced over at the neighbor's house, I noticed a flickering light in the upstairs window. It blinked in a rhythm that sent shivers down my spine, as if something or someone was moving around frantically inside. As the days passed, the oddities began to pile up. I found myself drawn to the peculiarities of that house next door. Each night, strange sounds wafted through the air, muffled voices and soft cries that seemed to seep through the walls, whispering secrets I couldn't grasp. The McAllisters would avoid my gaze when I attempted to discuss it, their nervousness only fueling my desire to uncover the truth. One afternoon, curiosity got the better of me. I returned home to find the door of number 27 slightly ajar, its ominous invitation impossible to resist. My heart raced as I approached, each step feeling heavier than the last. The dim light inside flickered uncertainly, and the air was thick with the scent of mold. I pushed the door open wider and called out, but the silence that greeted me was oppressive. Inside, the walls were lined with faded photographs of a family that had long since vanished, their smiles distorted in a haunting way. As I moved further in, I felt an undeniable chill crawling up my spine, like a warning against what I was about to uncover. The floorboards creaked beneath my weight, and just as I turned to leave, a loud thud resonated from the back of the house. My instinct screamed at me to flee, but something compelled me to press on. I took a deep breath and ventured further into the darkened hallway, drawn to the source of the noise. Little did I know that the secrets lurking within the walls of number 27 would soon entangle my fate, dragging me deeper into a web of horror I couldn't escape. The following days were a blur of confusion and dread. Despite my best efforts to distract myself with mundane tasks, unpacking boxes and organizing my new home, my mind constantly wandered back to the eerie house next door. Each night, as darkness enveloped the town, I could hear faint murmurs drifting through the air, punctuated by soft cries that made my skin crawl. I was trapped in a cycle of curiosity and fear, unable to ignore the dark pull of number 27. One evening, As I was preparing dinner, the noises grew louder, echoing through the walls. It felt like the house itself was alive, whispering secrets of sorrow and despair. I could almost make out the words, "Help us, help her." The chilling phrase sent a jolt of fear coursing through me. Who were these voices? What had happened in that house? That night, I decided to confront the situation head-on. I knew I couldn't keep avoiding the truth. After dinner, I grabbed a flashlight and steeled myself for another visit to number 27. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of purple and orange, I felt a mix of fear and determination. I had to know what was hidden behind those closed doors. The street was quiet as I approached the house, the wind rustling the leaves overhead like a whispering warning. I stood in front of the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The memories of the fleeting glimpse I had caught of the shadowy figure flashed through my mind, and I shivered. Gathering my courage, I pushed the door open, and it creaked eerily in response. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with tension. My flashlight beam flickered against the peeling wallpaper, illuminating the remnants of a life once lived. As I stepped further in, the whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a mournful wind. I could feel the weight of unseen eyes watching my every move, and a sense of urgency urged me to find the source of the cries. I made my way through the dimly lit hallway, stopping at a door that was slightly ajar. The sounds were coming from within. I paused, pressing my ear against the wood. It was a cacophony of anguish, voices layered upon one another, filled with despair. I couldn't understand what they were saying, but the tone was unmistakable. They were begging for help. With trembling hands, I pushed the door open. The room was dark, save for the faint glow of a dying light bulb swinging overhead. My breath caught in my throat as I scanned the room, and I felt my heart drop. The walls were adorned with more photographs, each one depicting a family at various stages of their lives, but their faces were now faded and smudged, as if time itself was trying to erase their existence. In the center of the room stood an old rocking chair, creaking back and forth as if someone had just left it. My eyes were drawn to a diary lying on a dusty table beside it, pages yellowed and brittle. I hesitated, but felt an overwhelming compulsion to see what secrets it held. I picked it up, and the moment my fingers touched the cover, a cold draft swept through the room, extinguishing the light above me. I gasped and fumbled with the flashlight, desperate to restore some illumination. As the beam flickered back to life, I opened the diary to the first entry. The handwriting was frantic, detailing a mother's growing fear for her children. "They won't stop crying," she wrote. "I can hear them every night. I see shadows moving in the dark. I'm losing my mind." My heart raced as I read further, each entry revealing the mother's descent into madness as she became consumed by the spirits that haunted her. The final entry was a chaotic scrawl. "They're here. I can't protect them." The cries intensified, now a chorus of anguish that echoed through the room. I felt as if the walls were closing in on me, suffocating me in their despair. Panic surged through my veins, urging me to escape. Just as I turned to leave, a sudden crash echoed from the back of the house, followed by a low growl that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. Frozen in place, I glanced back at the diary, heart pounding. I needed to know what had happened to that family. Were they trapped here, just like me? And what had caused the mother's madness? My mind raced as I fought the urge to flee, but I knew I couldn't turn back now. I took a deep breath and pushed through the fear. I had to confront the darkness head-on, no matter what horrors lay in wait. I stood in the dim room, my heart hammering as the low growl reverberated through the walls. It was a primal sound, filled with rage and sorrow, as if it were the very embodiment of the anguish that lingered in number 27. The air thickened with tension, and I felt my skin prickle, warning me to flee. Yet something compelled me to dig deeper. I was not merely a witness. I was part of this unfolding tragedy now. I cautiously stepped towards the back of the house, each creak of the floorboards beneath my feet echoing like a death knell. The growl transformed into a whisper, a voice that curled around my mind like smoke. "Help us, please." It was a plea laced with desperation, a call for salvation that resonated deep within my soul. As I approached a door at the end of the hallway, I could feel the temperature drop, a chill that wrapped around me like a suffocating blanket. I reached for the doorknob, half expecting it to burn my skin. To my surprise, it turned easily, and the door swung open with a heavy sigh, revealing a darkened room filled with shadows that danced across the walls. In the center of the room stood a child's bed, small and worn, covered with a threadbare blanket. Beside it, a toy chest sat, its lid slightly ajar. I glanced inside and found a jumble of forgotten toys, stuffed animals, broken dolls, and a cracked picture frame that seemed to capture a moment of joy long lost. My stomach twisted at the thought of what had happened to the innocent children who once played here. As I stepped further in, the whispers grew louder, swirling around me like a storm. Find us. Find us. I felt an overwhelming urge to listen, to uncover the truth hidden beneath the layers of grief that cloaked this house. I focused on the whispers, straining to understand their significance. Just then, I noticed a faint light flickering from the corner of the room. Moving closer, I discovered a small, dusty lamp, the light bulb flickering erratically. I flicked the switch, and the light steadied, illuminating the room in a soft glow. It was then that I spotted something taped to the wall behind the bed. An old photograph, yellowed and crinkled with age. I pulled it free and held it up to the light. It was a picture of the family who had lived here, smiling blissfully on a sunny day. The mother looked radiant, and the children were playing in the grass, carefree and oblivious to the darkness that would soon envelop their lives. But behind them, just at the edge of the frame, a shadow lurked. A tall figure, its features obscured, watching with an unsettling intensity. A chill ran down my spine as I realized that the figure in the photograph had not been noticed before. It was as if the darkness had been a part of their lives from the very beginning. Just then, the growling returned, louder and more threatening, echoing through the room and reverberating in my chest. I felt a sudden shift in the atmosphere, as if the very essence of the house was awakening. Shadows twisted and morphed, and I could see fleeting glimpses of figures darting at the edge of my vision. Panic surged through me. I needed to get out. But as I turned to leave, the door slammed shut, trapping me inside. My breath quickened, and I felt a wave of suffocating dread wash over me. I pressed against the door, my palms slick with sweat, desperation clawing at my throat. "Let me out," I shouted, my voice trembling as I pounded on the door. Suddenly, the whispers intensified, filling the air with a cacophony of voices pleading for release. "Help us! Help her!" It was as if the house itself was demanding my attention, urging me to confront the truth. Just when I thought I was trapped forever, the door creaked open, revealing a dark figure standing in the doorway. My heart dropped as I recognized the face, the mother from the photograph, her eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. "You shouldn't be here," she rasped, her voice barely above a whisper. "You need to leave, before it's too late." Fear gripped me as I stood frozen in place, unable to comprehend the reality before me. I had sought the truth, but now I faced the horrifying consequence of my curiosity. "Who did this to you?" I managed to stammer, my voice shaking. "What happened to your children?" Her expression twisted with grief. "They are trapped here, just like me. You must help them, or you'll suffer the same fate." As she spoke, I felt an overwhelming wave of emotion crash over me, a visceral connection to her pain. The shadows around her began to pulse with energy, and I realized I was standing at the precipice of a darkness that had consumed this family for far too long. In that moment, I understood that my journey had only just begun. I was no longer a mere observer. I was entwined in the very fabric of this tragedy. I had to find a way to free them before I became yet another lost soul in the nightmare of number 27.